Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving deep into The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous, a book that has shaped how millions think about money, economics, and the future of finance. Now, this isn't just another tech book about blockchain. Instead, Ammous takes us on a journey through the very history of money itself, why it exists, how it evolved, and why Bitcoin may represent the most powerful form of money ever invented. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just Bitcoin, but the bigger picture. How money influences entire civilizations. How government control over money reshaped the modern world. And why Bitcoin might be the escape hatch from a financial system many see as broken. Let's start at the beginning. Imagine you're a farmer in an ancient village. You grow wheat and you want shoes. You go to the shoemaker, but there's a problem. He doesn't need wheat. Maybe he wants milk or lumber or fish. This is called the double coincidence of wants. For trade to happen, both sides must want exactly what the other has, at the same time, in the right amount. And that makes barter extremely inefficient. The solution humans came up with was simple but revolutionary. Use a medium of exchange. Instead of trading wheat for shoes directly, you trade wheat for something that everyone else also wants. Then you can take that universal good to the shoemaker later. Different societies experimented with different proto-money salt because it was essential for preserving food, cattle because they were useful and relatively scarce. In some Pacific islands, giant limestone discs called rye stones served as currency. But all of these had weaknesses. Cattle die. Salt can be produced in large quantities. Stones are heavy and impossible to move. Over time, humans discovered that the best money has certain traits. It must be durable, not spoiling or decaying. It must be divisible, so you can make small or large payments. It must be portable, so you can carry it across distances. It must be recognizable, so everyone can trust it's real. And most importantly, it must be scarce, not something that can be easily reproduced. And out of all commodities, one rose above the rest: gold. Gold doesn't rust or decay. It's rare, but not impossibly rare. It can be divided into coins or melted into bars. It's shiny and recognizable everywhere. And most crucially, producing new gold requires tremendous effort, digging deep underground, sifting through tons of rock. By the time global trade networks began to connect Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas, gold had already become the undisputed monetary standard. Across centuries and continents, whether you were a merchant in Venice, a farmer in India, or a miner in South America, gold held its value. It became what economists call the hardest money, the money most resistant to sudden supply increases. As societies matured, gold became more than just shiny metal. It became the foundation of global trade. By the 19th century, much of the world had adopted the gold standard. This meant that national currencies were directly tied to gold reserves. If you held a banknote, you could exchange it for a fixed amount of gold at any time. Why was this powerful? Because it prevented governments from printing endless money. The supply of currency was limited by the supply of gold. The discipline created what economists call sound money. The effects were profound. International trade flourished because merchants trusted the stability of gold-backed currencies. Businesses could plan decades into the future without worrying that inflation would destroy their savings. ordinary people could store wealth safely for their children and grandchildren. Take Victorian Britain, for example. In the late 1800s, London was the financial capital of the world, and the pound was as good as gold. That stability fueled the Industrial Revolution, railroads, shipping, and scientific progress. And it wasn't just about economics. Ammous argues that sound money shapes culture. When people can save confidently, they think long-term. They invest in art, architecture, science, and education. High-time preference, living only for the moment, fades, and a culture of planning for the future takes over. Compare this to the Renaissance, funded by gold and silver wealth flowing into Europe, which allowed patrons to invest in centuries-long projects like cathedrals and masterpieces that still stand today. But there's a darker side to this story, because while sound money disciplines individuals and businesses, it also disciplines governments. And governments don't like that. They like to spend. They like to fund wars and programs without asking voters for higher taxes. And the gold standard stood in their way. This tension sets the stage for the fall of gold and the rise of fiat money. So, we left off with gold at the center of global trade. Nations prospered under the gold standard, individuals saved for the long term, and stability encouraged cultural and economic growth. But governments had a problem. Gold was a leash. It limited how much they could spend. And when political pressures rose, wars, depressions, social programs, leaders found the leash intolerable. The story of the 20th century is the story of breaking free from gold and replacing it with fiat money. How governments broke the gold standard. During World War I, European powers needed unimaginable sums of money to fund armies, weapons, and logistics. Taxing citizens directly would have sparked revolt. So instead, governments suspended the gold standard, printed massive amounts of paper currency, and promised they'd restore the gold link later. But once the war ended, they found it nearly impossible to return to honest money. The debts were too high, and printing had already inflated prices. The United States held on a bit longer. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system made the US dollar the global reserve currency. Other nations pegged their money to the dollar, and the dollar itself was pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. But by the late 1960s, America was overspending on the Vietnam War, on social programs, on expansion. Foreign governments started demanding gold in exchange for their dollars, and U.S. gold reserves drained quickly. Finally, in 1971, President Richard Nixon went on television and announced what he called a temporary suspension of the dollar's link to gold. That temporary suspension became permanent. From that moment on, no major currency in the world was tied to gold. We entered the fiat era. What fiat money really is. So what exactly is fiat money? The word fiat comes from Latin meaning, let it be done. In other words, fiat money has value simply because the government declares it so. A $20 bill is worth $20 because the government says it is, and because everyone else agrees to play along. But unlike gold, fiat money can be created in unlimited quantities. There is no natural scarcity. Politicians and central bankers can create more at will, with almost no cost. And here lies the problem. Inflation, the silent thief. When more money is created, but the amount of goods and services stays the same, prices rise. This is inflation. Inflation is often called the hidden tax because it quietly reduces the value of your savings without you noticing. Consider this. In 1913, when the Federal Reserve was founded, a single US dollar could buy what would cost over $25 today. That means holding dollars for a century destroyed more than 95% of their value. For savers, inflation is devastating. Imagine working hard for decades, putting money aside for retirement, only to watch its purchasing power melt away. Under sound money, your savings grow in value. Under fiat money, your savings are eaten alive. The culture of short-term thinking. But the effects of fiat go far beyond economics. Ammous argues that money actually shapes culture by influencing what he calls time preference. When money loses value year after year, people are discouraged from saving. Why put cash in the bank if it buys less tomorrow? Instead, people are pushed towards spending quickly or speculating in risky assets. This fosters a culture of debt and consumerism. Credit cards, loans, and mortgages become the norm. Instead of patiently building wealth, people chase quick gains. Whether in stock markets, real estate bubbles, or even lottery tickets. Contrast that with the mindset under gold-backed money. When savings held value, people thought in terms of decades. Families saved for future generations, businesses planned for the long term, and societies invested in cathedrals, railroads, and enduring institutions. Fiat money tilts culture toward the opposite. Fast fashion, disposable goods, and buy now, pay later. Booms, busts, and central bank power. Fiat money also hands enormous power to central banks. By controlling interest rates and money supply, central banks can engineer artificial booms. They pump credit into the economy, making borrowing cheap and encouraging spending. But when reality sets in, these booms collapse into painful busts. We've seen it again and again. The Great Depression of the 1930s, the stagflation of the 1970s, the dot-com bubble of the 2000s, the global financial crisis of 2008. In each case, easy money policies fueled reckless growth that eventually imploded. And yet, the solution central banks always propose is more easy money. Print more, lower rates, repeat the cycle. It's like curing a hangover with more alcohol. The hidden cost of endless money. Finally, fiat money allows governments to do things they never could under gold. Wars become easier to fund because you don't need to ask citizens for direct taxes, you just print. Bailouts for big corporations and banks, just print. Massive welfare states and ever-expanding bureaucracies, just print. The result is governments that grow bigger, debt that piles higher, and future generations left holding the bag. Summary of the fiat era. So to recap, fiat money is unlimited and easily manipulated. Inflation erodes savings and punishes responsibility. Culture shifts towards short-term consumption and debt. Central banks fuel booms and busts. Governments gain unchecked power to spend. This is the world we live in today. And it's the world Bitcoin was invented to challenge. At this point, it's clear that fiat money has serious problems. Endless inflation, reckless spending, and a culture of short-term thinking. But to really understand Ammous' argument, we need to step back and ask, why does sound money matter so much? Most people think of money as just a tool for trade, but Ammous insists that money goes deeper. It actually shapes civilization itself. Time preference, thinking short versus long-term. The key concept here is time preference. A high time preference means you value the present much more than the future. You want gratification now, even if it costs you later. A low time preference means you're willing to delay gratification to save, to invest, to plan for the long run. Sound money, money that holds its value, encourages a low time preference. It rewards patience. If your gold coin or your Bitcoin is likely to buy more in 10 years than today, you'll hold on to it, save it, and invest wisely. Fiat money does the opposite. Because it constantly loses value, people rush to spend, borrow, and consume. Why save if your money will be worth less tomorrow? This isn't just about personal finance. It's about the entire structure of society. A world built on sound money becomes a world of savings, investment, and cultural flourishing. A world built on weak money becomes one of waste, debt, and decay. Historical lessons. When money weakens, civilizations collapse. History is full of examples. The Roman Empire. For centuries, Rome's silver coin, the denarius, was trusted across the Mediterranean. But as the empire grew, emperors started mixing cheaper metals into the coins to pay for armies and luxuries. This debasement caused inflation, destroyed trust, and eroded Rome's economic foundation. Eventually, the empire collapsed under its own weight. Weimar Germany. After World War I, Germany printed money to pay war reparations and debts. The result was hyperinflation so severe that workers were paid twice a day, rushing to spend wages before prices doubled again. Savings were wiped out, social trust crumbled, and the stage was set for political extremism. Zimbabwe in the 2000s. Rampant money printing led to trillion-dollar banknotes that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. The economy collapsed, millions fled the country, and society unraveled. In each case, weak money didn't just cause economic pain, it destabilized entire societies. Sound money and civilization's greatest achievements. On the flip side, when money is sound, human progress accelerates. Think of the Renaissance. In Florence and Venice, gold florins and ducats became trusted currencies. Their stability allowed merchants and bankers to finance long-term projects. That wealth supported artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, and funded cathedrals and libraries that took generations to complete. Or think of the Industrial Revolution. Britain, under the gold standard, became a global powerhouse. Stable money encouraged investment in factories, railroads, and ships, projects that required decades of planning and immense capital. Sound money made people think beyond their own lifetimes. They built institutions, monuments, and knowledge that would outlive them. The cultural decay of fiat contrast that with today's fiat-driven culture. When savings lose value, people stop saving. When money encourages debt, people borrow recklessly. Instead of building cathedrals that last 500 years, we build strip malls that crumble in 30. Instead of investing in timeless art, we binge on disposable entertainment. Even family structures and communities feel the effects. Under sound money, parents save for their children and grandchildren. Under fiat, it often feels impossible to build lasting wealth, so people live for the present instead. Ammous doesn't just see this as economics, he sees it as a moral issue. Money that rewards patience, responsibility, and foresight strengthens society. Money that rewards recklessness, consumption, and gambling weakens it. Sound money as a restraining force on governments. There's another crucial point. Sound money disciplines governments. When money is tied to gold, or potentially to Bitcoin, politicians can't simply print their way out of bad decisions. They have to tax citizens openly if they want to spend, which forces accountability. Fiat breaks this restraint. Governments can finance wars, welfare states, and bailouts simply by printing more. Citizens feel the pain later through inflation, but the spending happens now, often without their consent. In this sense, fiat is a kind of invisible taxation without representation. Sound money restores that accountability. The core argument. So why does sound money matter? Because it doesn't just stabilize economies, it stabilizes civilizations. It encourages savings, investment, and cultural achievement. It discourages debt, waste, and reckless consumption. It keeps governments honest by limiting their ability to inflate. In Ammous's view, the difference between sound and unsound money is the difference between societies that build for the long run and societies that eat themselves alive. And this sets the stage for Bitcoin because he believes Bitcoin is the ultimate form of sound money. We've explored the rise and fall of money, from barter to gold to fiat. Now we arrive at Bitcoin, the reason this book exists. So what is Bitcoin? At its core, Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency. It was launched in 2009 by an anonymous figure known as Satoshi Nakamoto. Unlike dollars, euros, or yen, Bitcoin isn't issued by any government. Instead, it operates on a network of computers all around the world, using cryptography and a shared public ledger called the blockchain. Here's why Ammous argues Bitcoin is revolutionary. Fixed supply. 21 million coins. The most radical feature of Bitcoin is its cap. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoins. No central bank can create extra. No government can inflate it. This makes Bitcoin the hardest money ever created. Decentralization. No single point of control. Unlike fiat, which is controlled by central banks, Bitcoin runs on a peer-to-peer network. Thousands of independent machines verify transactions. Shutting it down would be like shutting down the entire internet. It's practically impossible. Digital divisibility and portability when Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million units, called Satoshis. That makes it far more divisible than gold. And because it's digital, it can move across the globe in minutes without permission from banks or governments. Security, proof of work, transactions are verified through a process called mining. This requires energy and computation, which makes the network extremely secure. Attacking Bitcoin would require unimaginable resources. Ammous often calls Bitcoin digital gold. Like gold, it's scarce, durable, and trusted. But unlike gold, it's easily stored, transported, and divided. It combines the best qualities of ancient money with the advantages of modern technology. In his view, Bitcoin is the first truly global, borderless, incorruptible form of money, a system built not on trust in governments, but on mathematics and consensus. Of course, no revolution comes without resistance. Ammous doesn't ignore Bitcoin's criticisms. Volatility. Bitcoin's price is famously unstable. One month it might rise 50%, the next it might crash 40%. Critics say this makes it useless as money. Ammous responds that in its early stages, volatility is normal. As adoption grows and the supply remains fixed, stability should naturally increase. Energy use. Bitcoin mining consumes enormous amounts of electricity. Opponents call it wasteful. Ammous flips this argument. The energy isn't waste. It's the cost of securing the hardest money ever created. Just as gold mining consumes energy to dig scarce metal from the ground, Bitcoin mining consumes energy to dig digital scarcity out of mathematics. Government-resistant states may not welcome a money they cannot control. Bans, regulations, and hostility are real risks. Yet Bitcoin's decentralization makes it resilient. Even if one country bans it, others may embrace it, and the network keeps running. Scalability: Bitcoin's base layer can only handle a limited number of transactions per second. But just as the internet has layers, emails, websites, apps, Bitcoin is developing second layers like the Lightning Network, which allow for instant, low-cost payments. To Ammous, these challenges aren't deal breakers, they're growing pains. Every groundbreaking technology, from electricity to the internet, faced skepticism in its early days. Finally, we reach the heart of Ammous's vision. Bitcoin isn't just about finance, it's about culture, civilization, and the future of humanity. A shift toward low-time preference. If Bitcoin becomes global money, it could reverse the cultural decay of the Fiat era. With savings that hold value or even grow over time, people would once again plan long-term. Families would save for generations. Businesses would invest with patience. Wasteful consumerism could decline. Discipline for governments. For states, Bitcoin would mean the end of money printing as a political weapon. To fund wars or massive programs, governments would need to tax openly, not quietly inflate away wealth. That could bring accountability back into politics. A global neutral money: Bitcoin is borderless. It doesn't care whether you're in New York, Lagos, or Buenos Aires. For billions of people living under weak or corrupt currencies, Bitcoin could be a lifeline, a way to store value free from government abuse. A peaceful revolution: Ammous frames Bitcoin as a peaceful separation of money and state. Just as the printing press broke the church's monopoly on knowledge, Bitcoin could break government's monopoly on money. Instead of revolutions fueled by blood, this could be a revolution fueled by code. So, what's the big picture we've uncovered in this journey through the Bitcoin standard? Throughout history, money has not been a side character. It has been the stage itself on which civilizations rise and fall. Weak money has always led to chaos. Rome debasing its silver coins, Weimar Germany inflating its currency into oblivion, Zimbabwe printing trillion-dollar notes. In every case, money that could be manipulated or created at will became a tool of destruction. On the other hand, strong money, gold, silver, or other forms that were naturally scarce, gave people stability. It allowed them to think decades ahead, to save, to build. It laid the foundation for cathedrals, libraries, universities, trade networks, and even the scientific method itself. That's the central argument Ammous drives home. Money is not neutral. It either pushes people towards short-term consumption or toward long-term civilization building. And the type of money we use determines which direction society takes. Now we stand at a crossroads. Fiat money is still dominant, but it shows cracks everywhere. Endless inflation eating away at savings. Debt piling up to historic levels. A culture of disposability and instant gratification. Governments able to quietly tax citizens through money printing without ever asking permission. And in the middle of this, Bitcoin emerges. Not as a new gadget or a speculative asset, but as an entirely different monetary standard, one that no government can inflate, no bank can control, and no single person can corrupt. Bitcoin's hard cap of 21 million coins is more than a number. It's a statement. It says money should be scarce, predictable, and outside the reach of politics. If Bitcoin succeeds, what could that world look like? A world where savings grow stronger over time instead of weaker. A world where governments must be transparent because they can't simply print money in secret. A world where billions of people in unstable economies, from Argentina to Lebanon to Nigeria, finally have access to reliable money. A world where long-term thinking returns, where people once again invest in projects that last generations instead of quarters. Of course, no one can predict the future. Maybe Bitcoin becomes the global standard. Maybe it coexists alongside Fiat. Maybe it evolves into something we can't yet imagine. But what Ammous makes clear is this: the current system is broken, and Bitcoin is our best candidate for fixing it. Even if you never buy a single Satoshi, this book forces you to ask uncomfortable but important questions. Why do we trust money that constantly loses value? Why do we accept that governments can print unlimited currency while we must work for every dollar? And most of all, what would the world look like if money itself were honest? So as we close this exploration, think of it this way. The Bitcoin Standard isn't just a book about digital currency. It's a book about civilization. It's about the kind of world we want to leave behind. One built on fragile, inflating money, or one built on something harder, stronger, and freer. Because if money is the foundation of society, then Bitcoin may be the blueprint for the next chapter of human history. And that wraps up our deep dive into the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video gave you a clearer picture of why money matters, how history has been shaped by it, and why Bitcoin might be such a groundbreaking development. If you enjoyed this summary and want to see more book breakdowns like this, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Bitcoin really could become the foundation of a new monetary system? Or will governments and central banks manage to hold on to control? Your perspective makes this discussion even richer, so please share. Thanks again for joining me today. And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next video.